The Druid is one of the top most complicated classes to choose in Dungeons & Dragons. And that makes sense, because on top of choosing the usual species, background, class, and subclass, it's also a caster, so you have to choose all of the spells that are going to work best for any situation. And then on top of that, they also have transformations, and they get to turn into various beasts. And you have to go through an entire list of beasts just to figure out which one's the best for what scenario. But I combed through all of that so you don't have to. So let's build the ultimate Druid in Dungeons & Dragons. First, we need to start with the species. Now, as always, there's tons of great species in D&D, but because of how druids work, and they have the ability to transform into beasts, there's certain things from a species that isn't gonna carry over, because some things are directly connected to what type of species you choose. However, one thing that carries over when you transform as a druid into your wild shape, which we will cover in just a moment, is the fact that your hit points do carry over. So one great way to optimize this is by going with a dwarf, because dwarves get one more hit point per level of their overall build, boosting up that health pool of theirs, which carries over no matter what form they're going to choose. And similarly, when we choose a background, we want to be able to focus on this again by going with the farmer background. There's tons of great backgrounds out there now, some of them giving expanded spell lists, some of them having crazy features like the stuff in Ravenloft, but the tried and true abilities of a farmer, giving you the tough feat, which gives you an extra 2 hit points of health per level of this overall build, will be the best choice, because boosting up our hit points is going to help us more than anything, because druids already have a pretty solid spell list and most of their feats aren't going to help us as much as more health will. Then when it comes to the class, obviously we're going with druid, and that's what we need to optimize. When you become a druid, you get to choose 2 skills. So we're going to go with perception, because it's applicable pretty much all the time, and we're going to go with insight, because in any social situation, it's best to make sure you can understand what people are trying to say, or maybe some sort of hidden agenda they have. And both of these skills are reliant on wisdom, which is a primary stat of a druid. They also get access to light armor and shields, and you're going to want to be wearing the best armor you can for the time being. And speaking of that, at first level of druid, you get to choose a primal order. Now, this allows you to boost up the type of armor you can wear to medium armor, but we won't really need that as much. So instead, we're going to choose the primal order of the magician. This allows us to get an extra cantrip. So we're going to grab Thorn Whip. This is going to be a very helpful cantrip later on, but not exactly right away. But also on top of that, you can now add your wisdom modifier to any arcana or nature checks. Also at first level of druid, you get druidic, which is a language only druids know, and you get some spellcasting. So I would go with guidance, which really helps in pretty much any situation where their skill check is needed. Resistance, to give you some ability to activate it and give yourself resistance to one source of damage one time. It's just one little defensive option. And then for some actual attack stuff, grab Thunderclap, which does a small area of effect damage around you, and then follow it up with something like Primal Savagery. It's just kind of a fun thing to play around with. It allows you to basically brandish some claws or something and slash out at your enemies using your wisdom modifier. But when it comes to first level spells, there's only one that we really need, at least for right now. And that's going to be Long Strider. This is going to boost your speed by 10 feet. Luckily, in 2024, they changed the dwarf, so that way it doesn't have a slower speed anyways, but having at least a small boost to your movement speed can be very helpful. You're also going to want to grab Cure Wounds, but that's just so you have some sort of healing, but we're going to tweak that a little bit in just a moment. Then at second level of Druid, you get one of the most important features that differentiate a druid from any other class in D&D, and that's Wild Shape. So this is a feature that as of right now you can use twice, but as you level up in Druid, you get more uses of it, all the way up to 4 uses per long rest. But you can also regain 1 use of it on a short rest. Now they do give you the ability to use this for a feature called Wild Companion, basically giving you the spell Summon Familiar, and you can use a Wild Shape for this, but we're not going to be using it for that. Instead, we're going to be using it for what it's intended for, which is allowing you to turn into some type of beast. So in the monster manual and any additional enemies that pop up throughout any of the books in D&D, there are creatures classified as beasts. You can turn into them as a druid, but there is some limitations here. Right now, you can only learn 4 forms. So you know 4 different beasts, but you can actually swap these out every long rest if you want to. Now, there are some specific rules about what happens when you wild shape into one of these beast forms. First, there's a limitation on the power of the beast. Now, we're going to cover that when we're going to go through which forms are best, because there are tons and tons of different beasts in D&D to comb through and figure out which ones are best, but I did all that work for you. However, the big things that you need to know about when it comes to transforming is 1, you get temporary hit points. So when you transform into a beast, you get temp HP equal to your druid level, and that stacks on top of your base hit points. Because after 2024, they made a few tweaks, so now you keep your current hit points. You just get that temp HP on top of it when you transform. This expands the options considerably, because now you don't have to worry about if you're selecting some sort of creature that has a super tiny health pool. Now you can choose whatever you want as long as it applies to the situation, because it's your hit points and the temp HP is based off your druid level. Nothing else matters. The other things that stick with you when you transform are all of your mental stats, so your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. You still maintain the ability to speak, which was a big difficulty in older versions, and you do still maintain any feats that you pick up. However, there is a limitation on things that you actually get from what species you chose, so you can't really benefit from the enhanced armor class, from being a warforged, or maybe some of the other enhanced abilities and features. It's very limiting, and a lot of it's going to depend on what your dungeon master is allowing. So I chose the dwarf because you get something that applies no matter what, which is your hit points. Then on top of that, whenever you have to make a skill check or use a proficiency bonus or make any sort of saving throw, you get to use either the modifier of yourself or what the beast has and just choose which one's better. The other 2 limitations: you can't really interact with objects unless the form of the beast you chose can do so. Like, you can't be a dolphin and trying to use your flipper to type on a keyboard. It's not going to work very well. And then the final limitation is that you can't cast spells, at least not yet. But if you already have a spell that is active, you can still keep it active. You can still keep using it as intended. You just can't do the initial casting of it. Now, into the limitation of the challenge rating or the strength of the creature. So in D&D, they have a challenge rating, and this is essentially the power level of the creature. At this point, you can only have a beast of challenge rating 1/4 or lower. So that means if it's a challenge rating 0 or 1/8 or 1/4, those are the ones you get to choose. I combed through all of them. And not only did I comb through all of them for the books that came out in 2024, I also grabbed everything that would be allowed to be used in 5.5e, aka the updated 2024 edition of D&D, which means that any stuff that you can find in older 5th edition, you can still use here as long as your dungeon master is okay with it, because of course they're the creator of your imaginary world here. So I will list out every one that you should take, as well as some alternatives if your dungeon master allows it. First of all, at this point, most of what you want is for pure utility. So 1, you want to be able to turn into an octopus. This gives you a swimming speed, which we don't have to worry about any limitation there. You can now swim at any level, and you can breathe underwater as an octopus. And octopuses specifically can kind of squeeze through tiny spaces. They can actually get through a space as small as 1 inch. So this is very helpful for getting to the other side of doors where you only have a small crack or something like that. You can really use an octopus to an insane degree. Then another great utility option is a giant badger. They have a burrow speed, so they can create tunnels burrowing through the ground, helping your entire party tunnel through them with you. But I should note that the adventure Out of the Abyss also adds a cave badger. It has very similar features, but it does have multi-attack, so it's actually a pretty good attacking option, and it even does better damage. Then another great option is a giant wolf spider. This will give you spider climb, obviously, so you can crawl across ceilings and walls and whatever you need. Then if you actually want to be able to attack with whatever you're using for your transformation here, I would definitely go with a wolf. It's basic, it's usable from the 2024 Monster Manual, and it has a feature called Pack Tactics, so if you have any allies near you, you have advantage on your attack. But if you can use the book Monsters of the Multiverse, you have a better option by choosing the Velociraptor. Now, this isn't a Jurassic Park Velociraptor, this is a more historically accurate Velociraptor, because the one from Jurassic Park is actually more of a Utah Raptor, but that's a random dinosaur nerd thing. Actual Velociraptors are about the size of turkeys, and the ones from the Monsters of the Multiverse book have pack tactics just like a wolf, but they also have multi-attack, so you get more attacks. The only other wild shape you might want to swap in, depending on the scenario, is a bat, but you don't get a fly speed at this level, so you're basically just a mobile version of being able to use blind sight and helping out the party, but that's a very, very niche situation. Other decent options include a giant frog that can swallow small enemies, but it really limits their abilities later, but they're still essentially doing acid damage in their stomach in the meantime, or a giant centipede that can inflict the poison condition. All those are very specific situations, so I would recommend that top 4 list I already mentioned. Now, once you get to 4th level of Druid, you can get access to 6 different forms you can know, and the challenge rating of the creature increases to 1/2. And then once you hit 8th level of Druid, you can actually go up to challenge rating level 1, and you can choose a flying speed creature and have access to the flying speed. And on top of that, you get access to 8 different wild shape forms that you can know every single day. But that entire restriction is all based around what subclass you choose, because there's a whole bunch of Druid subclasses and a lot of them are great. The old Shepherd's Druid used to be amazing, and it used to be one of the best healers and mass summon combatant in D&D, but they got rid of the majority of mass summoning after 2024. For good reason, I understand it, but it does kind of hurt me a little bit on the inside. There's some interesting stuff with the Sea Druid or the Spores Druid, but I think the subclass really comes down to the top 3. There's the Circle of the Land, which is more about casting. It is a little better at healing, but healing in D&D is really easy, so you don't really need to enhance that very much, especially after they boosted all of the healing spells in 2024. And we already can swap out our spells every long rest anyways, so I don't think it's that great. You have plenty of options already. The other great option is the Stars Druid. They're versatile, they can enhance their healing or their damaging ability, or boost up their ability to concentrate on stuff. Overall, they have some great options. It is probably the second best choice here, because the first best is no surprise, it's a Moon Druid. They really focus in on the wild shape transformations, but they are more difficult to plan out, because they can wild shape into way more creatures than any other type of Druid. And part of the reason I want to choose them is because if you're going as a Druid, it's best to have more options for your wild shape. It's part of what makes a Druid good. It's part of what makes them so amazing in so many scenarios. So choosing anything other than a Moon Druid is kind of holding them back, because if you just want a pure caster, there's plenty of other choices with Sorcerer and Wizard and whatever else. If you just want to do pure healing, you could still do that with a Druid, and you could probably do it with a Cleric or anything else. But there's only one class that has the ability to do wild shapes, and that's a Druid. So let's enhance that, because now the limitation on the challenge rating of the beast that you can turn into is now 1/3 of your Druid level. So now you can already turn into a challenge rating level 1 creature, and all the way at max level you can choose up to a CR6, because it's your Druid level divided by 3 rounded down. The other enhancement for your wild shapes is that your armor class gets boosted. So now, when you transform into a wild shape, your armor class by default is 13 plus your wisdom modifier, unless the beast you turn into happens to have a higher armor class. And then finally, the temporary hit points you get when you transform, instead of just being your Druid level, now it's 3 times your Druid level, which is a pretty massive shield of health. But one thing I have to point out is that when you lose your temp HP, that doesn't mean that you revert back to your non-wild shape form. You can still be in wild shape all the way until you get to 0 health and are incapacitated. So you can make this last pretty darn long. Then when you choose this subclass, you get some Circle of the Moon spells. So now you don't have to have Cure Wounds prepared, you just automatically know it, so you don't have to have it take up a spot on your spell list. And something very important about any Moon Druid related spells, you can cast them while you're in your wild shape form, because you don't usually have the ability to cast anything in your wild shape form until a much higher level. The Moon Druid spell list also includes Moonbeam, so you can essentially blast out a ray of moonlight, harming your enemies, and then you also automatically get the cantrip Starry Wisp, which is great because most of the Moon Druid transformations you're going to do are going to be melee focused. And if something is too far away, you're kind of stuck unless you can cast Starry Wisp, which is a ranged cantrip. Also at this level, you get access to second level spells. And depending on how your Dungeon Master rules things, you kind of want to make sure that you can at least see in the dark depending on whatever you transform into. So grab the spell Dark Vision. Another absolutely amazing spell that needs to be utilized as much as possible is Heat Metal, and you can activate this before you transform and then just keep activating it as your bonus action over and over again, because it allows you to heat up metal that an enemy is wearing or holding and just keep doing fire damage to them, burning them and forcing them to have disadvantage while they're in contact with it. And then the last second level spell you should grab is because you don't want to be the only beast on the field, so grab the spell Summon Beast. Just gives you some backup. And as we're going through all these transformations and all these spells, I know it can get kind of confusing, so if you want to follow along, they'll be up on my Patreon, link down below. There'll be a full character sheet there. It'll make it a little easier. But let's keep going. But remember, you want to keep all those spells that you can active before you transform, because now you have some new wild shape transformation options for some utility depending on your party makeup. I would probably hang on to either Octopus to squeeze through small spaces or the Badger, so that way you can do some burrowing. But if you find yourself actually going into water pretty often, go with a Giant Reef Shark. Does solid damage, and it's obviously going to be in the water. Swap out your Giant Wolf Spider for just a straight up Giant Spider. They're generally just the same thing but better. And then for a attacking kind of option, go with a Brown Bear. At least if your Dungeon Master only allows the basics, because there's two alternatives depending on what your Dungeon Master allows. So stick with the Brown Bear. It's great. It's just a very solid choice. They get multi-attack and they can knock an enemy prone, which is super helpful in the battlefield. But if your DM allows you to use something from the adventure book, Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, you have a different option, because then you can go with an Awakened Brown Bear instead. It's the exact same thing, but just better damage dice. It gets +1 more to hit, doing +6 to hit instead of the basic Brown Bear's +5. Its bite attack does 1d8 +4, while the basic Brown Bear is 1d8 +3. And then the claw attack gets a huge boost because the basic version just does 1d4 +3, while the awakened version will deal 2d6 +4. No, that's a lot of random dice, but it's pretty helpful. But the even better version beyond that is if you choose the 5e version of the Eberron book, because D&D added an Eberron book in 2025. So it just depends whether or not your DM will allow it. But in the 5e version of the Eberron book, they added a beast called Clawfoot. It's another dinosaur creature. It has multi-attack. It does slightly less damage than the awakened brown bear, but it does allow you to have a pounce attack as well, which will allow you to attack again as a bonus action as part of that pounce. So it essentially gives you 3 attacks if you do it right, but you do have to have basically a running start of 20 feet up against your target. That is the best options here. Reef Shark, Giant Spider, and then one of those 3 damaging options depending on what your Dungeon Master allows. Then hang on to either the Octopus or the Badger. Then at 4th level of Druid, you get an ability score improvement. And we're going to be choosing something that isn't going to help us yet, but it will help us very, very soon, so I want to grab it now. So we're going to grab a feat, and we're going to go with Cold Caster. This will allow us to learn the Ray of Frost cantrip, which is great. It slows down enemies, and it blasts with some cold damage. But since this is a feat giving you the ability to cast it, you should be able to cast it while you're in your wild shape form, because you're allowed to hang on to feats while you're in your wild shape. So you gained this ability, it all counts. And this feat also gives you the feature Frostbite. So when you make any sort of attack roll that winds up dealing some cold damage, the enemy that gets hit with that has to subtract 1d4 from its next saving throw before the end of your next turn. And this is very important because so many beast forms will require saving throws because of some random ability they have. And even beyond that, you also have plenty of saving throw spells as well. So having a 1d4 subtracted from everything is pretty solid. And we'll have other ways to apply cold damage beyond this spell later. Then on top of that, you get to take your ability scores, because these are our ability scores, and then we're going to boost up our wisdom by +1, rounding it out. Obviously, we're a bit min-maxed here, but we don't have to worry too much about dex since we're going to be transformed most of the time. So having a big armor class isn't really going to help us that much. So outside of wisdom, constitution is going to be our main thing. Then at 5th level of Druid, you get to choose some more spells because you have access to a higher level of spellcasting. Thanks to being a moon druid, you get conjure animals, so you can cast that while you're wild shaped if you need to, and it just summons a area of spectral animals that if any enemy gets too close, they'll do damage to it, and it's a pretty solid spell. As far as spells you want to be able to choose, I would go with Aura Vitality, so that way you can heal allies around you, especially if there's any other ally nearby in melee range. Then you also want to grab Call Lightning. It allows you to summon a storm of lightning, and then you can keep raining down lightning bolts around you. It's another concentration spell. You can keep it active the whole time you're wild shape, as long as you activate it before you turn into whatever beast you're going to change into. Grab Tidal Wave, which I had a player in one of my campaigns that used this constantly. Just a big tidal wave that knocks down enemies, pushes them away, and deals a decent amount of damage. And then one spell you want to grab, which is going to help you a lot, is Water Breathing. And that's true for any beasts you turn into going forward. If you have the need to have the ability to breathe underwater, don't worry as much about whether or not it's a sea creature, just worry about whether or not it has a swim speed. Then the big issue with having wild shapes is that you might run out of them. But at 5th level, you get a feature called Wild Resurgence. So on each of your turns, if you don't have any more uses of Wild Shape left, you can actually expend any level spell slot and get a use of Wild Shape. It doesn't even cost you any action economy. But on top of this, you can actually use the reverse. So if you want, you can use a Wild Shape to get a level 1 spell slot, but you can only use that every long rest. 6th level of being a Moon Druid gets you improved circle forms, giving you 2 features. The first is Lunar Radiance. So when you attack while in your Wild Shape form, you can deal its normal damage, or you can deal radiant damage, whichever one you want. And on top of that, you get increased toughness. So you can actually add your wisdom modifier to your constitution saving throws, making it so that you can concentrate on your spells much better. And considering you want to cast something and then transform and keep concentrating, that's really going to come in handy. Then also, thanks to being a moon druid, you get access to challenge rating level 2 creatures. You want to still hang on to the giant spider for utility, but there's another option at this level if you're allowed to access the adventure module Storm King's Thunder, because that allows you to grab the Ice Spider Queen. It has all the benefits of a giant spider, but it also has an icy aura that it can do, damaging nearby enemies. But I should note that the cold caster ability is not going to kick in because it's not going to require an attack roll. But having a small area of effect damaging ability is pretty solid if your DM is going to allow you to use Storm King's Thunder. Then you want a Quetzalcoatlus. It's literally the biggest flying creature you can grab. It's a giant dinosaur that flies. You don't actually want this for much of the damaging, but there's a cheesy thing you can do once you get the ability to fly. So you don't really want to grab this option until you can fly, which is at level 8 of Druid. But once you can, this gives you the ability to grab enemies and fly up really high and just drop them, because it's a huge creature. Grappling and flying is going to be no problem, and dropping enemies can do a boatload of damage. And don't forget, you have a couple more wild transformations here, so you can hang on to some of them that you feel are giving you more utility. But as far as straightforward attacking and having something to transform into for battle, go with a polar bear. They get a swimming speed, and if you cast water breathing before you turn into the polar bear, that means that you now have a water based creature that does better attacking than most other water beasts that you could turn into before, because you're a polar bear that can breathe underwater. You don't have to worry as much about turning into a shark. And they get a decent attacking ability. They have multi-attack, they can knock enemies prone, and on top of that, they have resistance to cold damage, just in case you come up against anything that would deal that. But if you can grab something from Tales from the Yawning Portal, which there are a lot of great creatures in there, so if you only have the option to choose one, I would probably grab that book. You can go with a huge polar bear instead. It's basically the same thing, but it just does more damage. At 7th level of Druid, you get access to a higher level spellcasting. And thanks to being a moon druid, you automatically get Fount of Moonlight, which allows you to shine with some light. It makes you resistant to radiant damage, but most importantly, it adds an extra 2d6 damage to every attack that you make. And if a creature hits you while you have this spell active, you can use your reaction to force that creature to make a Constitution saving throw, otherwise they're blinded, which is also super powerful. And you get some big enhancements as far as spells you can actually choose at this level too, because if you don't care as much about blinding your enemies, before you get into battle, you can cast Conjure Minor Elementals, which is an absolutely amazing spell. It'll actually do a little more damage because it'll add 2d8 elemental damage to every attack you make. And that damage can be cold damage, activating your cold caster feat. And on top of that, you emit this area of 15 feet around you, dealing some sort of elemental feel or vibe that creates a difficult terrain within 15 feet of you. And considering you're in melee range most of the time, transforming into stuff, that means that enemies are going to be slower trying to get away. If you're not doing as many attacks and you're surrounded by a lot of enemies, or you know you're about to be surrounded by a lot of enemies, a better option is with Conjure Woodland Beings. This creates a 10-foot emanation around you that does 5d8 damage. It's force damage, so not many people are going to be able to resist it, and that's just a solid amount of damage just constantly emitting from you as you're surrounded by spiritual beast or woodland creatures. And if you feel like you're too in over your head, as a bonus action, you can take the disengage action when you have the spell active. Then one other great enhancing spell is Guardian of Nature. You can activate it as a bonus action, and then you get to choose one of two forms to take while you're transformed into a Guardian of Nature. You either become more of a great tree, which doesn't really fit as well with this build style because it gives you some temp HP, and temporary hit points don't stack. So once you turn into your wild shape, this is immediately going to erase the temp HP. And this will give you advantage on Dex and Wisdom attack rolls, which is great for spell casting, but it's not going to help as much for most of your wild shapes because most of those are based on strength. But it would give you advantage on con saves, and it makes difficult terrain within 15 feet of you. But what you probably want to use it for more is Primal Beast. It fits with the whole vibe anyways. This will improve your walking speed by 10 feet. It'll give you dark vision. It gives you advantage on any strength-based attack roll, which is going to be the majority of your wild shapes. And in case you were worried about your damage not being boosted, it can do that too, but whether or not it actually applies is a little more restricting because it only boosts the damage you make with melee weapon attacks by 1d6. So it just kind of depends on whether or not your DM is going to allow that part. But still, having advantage on all your strength-based attacks is still pretty solid, and the other bonuses are great too. Then maybe you don't want to be the only person in your party as a giant beast or whatever attacking people. So grab Polymorph to transform one of your allies into a random creature, or transform an enemy if you want to transform them into a little bug that you can bottle up and do something with. But you might also want some backup, so grab Summon Giant Insect to summon a giant insect to fight alongside you in battle, as much as the idea of that kind of grosses me out. Or you can go with Summon Elemental to have an elemental creature to back you up. And finally, you get one more feature at 7th level called Primal Fury. So you can choose to enhance your spellcasting, but instead we're going to enhance our attacking ability with physical stuff by choosing the feature Primal Strike. So once per turn, if you attack with a weapon or any attack with a wild shape transformation, you can deal an extra 1d8 elemental damage. And it can be cold damage, so it can trigger your cold caster stuff. Then at 8th level of Druid, you get another ability score improvement. So go ahead and max out that Wisdom, putting 2 points there. Then at 9th level of Druid, you get access to a higher level spellcasting. Thanks to being a moon druid, you get mass cure wounds, so you can heal the whole party. But as far as spells you actually want to choose, there's only really one, and it's going to be the next best summon that you can have, which is Summon Draconic Spirit. You're literally summoning a giant dragon to back you up. And also at this level, you get access to challenge rating level 3 beasts to turn into. There's one that's a good option for if you're in the water and you don't want to be a polar bear, and that's a giant lightning eel. It just gives you the ability to electrocute people if you want to, but that does have a recharge timer, so you might want to stick with a polar bear most of the time. However, there are 2 wild shape options that are actually really important. One of them comes from Tales from the Yawning Portal. As I said, this one's going to pop up a few times, because this can allow you to transform into an Amphisbaena, I think is how you pronounce it. It's basically a giant anaconda snake. It's a huge beast, and it's got some great abilities. It has multi-attack, allowing it to attack twice. It can be either 2 bites, or one of those attacks can be a constricting attack. So the bite attack is solid. It's a +6 to hit. It does 2d6 + 4 damage. But the constrict ability is where it really shines, because it allows you to do a attack that deals bludgeoning damage for an amount equal to 2d8 + 4, which is already solid damage. But if you hit with this, the target is immediately grappled, and it requires a DC 16 to escape, which is pretty high for an enemy to have to escape anything. You can only constrict one enemy at a time, but while an enemy is grappled like this, they're actually restrained. So an enemy that's restrained is really stuck. They can't really do a lot, they can't really move, and you have advantage on all of your attacks against them. So it's an absolutely great option. But the other one you must grab is a giant scorpion, because first of all, it gets 3 attacks, which is super good already. 2 of those attacks are with the claws, which can grapple enemies at the same time, and you can grapple 2 enemies simultaneously, so you're really solid there as well. And then the 3rd attack is with your stinger, which does some piercing damage and some poison damage, all of which is very solid. 10th level of being a Circle of the Moon Druid gives you Moonlight Step. Just in case you don't have enough mobility in whatever you're turning into, Moonlight Step allows you to teleport as a bonus action, while also giving you advantage on the next attack you make after you teleport. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, and you can recharge it on a long rest, or if you spend a level 2 spell slot or higher to regain the uses of it, but that doesn't require any action. It just requires a level 2 spell slot per use that you want to recharge. Then at 11th level of Druid, you get access to higher level spellcasting again. And there's 4 great spells here. First, you want to grab Sunbeam. This essentially blasts energy out of your mouth straight at whoever you want, or at least in my head, it's blasted out of your mouth, but I should probably not say that very often. Anyways, it does a beam in a 60-foot line, and it deals 6d8 radiant damage. And you can keep changing up where this line goes every single turn. To make sure your whole party's boosted before the battle, grab Hero's Feast. It has a ton of buffing effects and makes everybody have more HP, has immunity to being frightened, all sorts of great stuff. You can also grab Primordial Ward, which gives you resistance to acid, cold, fire, lightning, and thunder damage. If you do take damage of any elemental type, you can use your reaction to instead gain immunity to whatever that damage type is, including that damaging event that forced you to take the reaction in the first place. But if you do use that part of this spell, your immunity only lasts until the end of your next turn, and then at that point the spell ends. And then the last spell is going to be Druid Grove. This is actually a really great spell that I don't use often enough. It takes 10 minutes to cast, but if you know where a battle's going to be, or you want to make sure you're well protected, this is super good. It can create areas of solid fog, creating obscurity. It can create a bunch of squares of difficult terrain that are covered by vines, essentially being under the effect of the Entangled spell, but in a much larger area, because this spell can encompass a 30-foot cube or up to a 90-foot cube. Or if you really want some backup, they have a feature of this spell called Grove Guardians, bringing trees to life and becoming awakened trees. and there's up to 4 of them. They can just patrol around the area fighting for you or just fighting alongside you. And if in-game you wind up casting the spell on the same area every day for a year, it becomes permanent, which is kind of a cool feature. You can also add an additional optional effect like adding spike growth in an area, wind wall in an area, or constant gusts of wind. Then at 12th level of Druid, you get another ability score improvement. And frankly, I was very tempted to grab Grappler because there's so many creatures that have a grappling ability, but Grappler as a feat only allows you to grapple as part of your attack, and other than that, it's only going to give you advantage, and a lot of your grappling features in your wild shape forms are already going to make the creature restrained, which would give you advantage anyways. And the only other possible benefit is if you turn into that Quetzalcoatlus to fly up really high, because it won't reduce your movement speed. But for that one niche scenario, it's not worth grabbing Grappler. So instead, I'm going to boost up our Constitution by 2 points. And also, you get access to CR level 4. There's 3 that you might want to swap out here. One is an Archelon, which is basically like a giant dinosaur turtle thing. It's from the 2025 Monster Manual, and it's pretty solid. It's amphibious, so it can breathe in air or water, and it does some pretty decent damage, and it has multi-attack, doing 2 solid attacks for 3d6 damage plus 4. A really fun one from the Yawning Portal is a giant subterranean lizard. Other giant toads or giant frogs have the ability to swallow enemies, but they can't really bite anybody a lot of the time after they've swallowed someone. But this creature can swallow and still be biting folks because it's so big. It just keeps things in its belly and then still can bite out, and it's good. It gets 2 attacks, can swallow an enemy, restraining them and doing a bunch of acid damage, and then it keeps biting and hitting with its tail or whatever. The last one you probably want to grab is an elephant, because this gives you multi-attack, does pretty solid damage, but it also has a bonus action ability to trample an enemy just stomping on them and dealing an extra 2d10 plus 6 damage. Then at 13th level of Druid, you get access to higher level spellcasting again. There's only one worth grabbing, and that's Regenerate. It's just a constantly healing yourself kind of spell. 14th level of Druid gives you improved Lunar Form, because Circle of the Moon is just making you that much stronger now. So when you attack with your wild shape form, you deal an extra 2d10 radiant damage once per turn. And then on top of that, when you use that teleportation ability as a bonus action, if there's an ally within 10 feet of you, you can bring them along for the teleporting. Then at 15th level of Druid, you get improved Elemental Fury. So if you chose the casting version of this earlier, it would boost up the range of your cast, but we don't care about that. We care about the improved Primal Strike. So now the elemental damage you deal gets boosted to 2d8. You also get access to 8th level spells at this point, and so we're going to grab Sunburst. It's a big radiant damage kind of thing. And thanks to being a Moon Druid, you now have access to Challenge Rating level 5. And there's 3 good options here. The first is a giant crocodile. It gets 2 attacks, both of which have super solid damage. And they have multiple crowd control effects. They can restrain somebody by biting them and hanging on, or they can knock somebody prone with their big, strong tail. If you're in the water, there's a new great option, and that's a giant shark. The best part about this, other than it gets multi-attack and a decent amount of damage, is that it always has advantage against any target that is at less than max health. Almost like it can smell blood in the water. Then the final good option is a Triceratops. It allows you to do multi-attack, does some solid damage, and if you charge at least 20 feet at your enemy, you can do some bonus damage and knock an enemy prone. 16th level of Druid gives you another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and max out that Constitution. And then at 17th level of Druid, you get access to 9th level spells. And there's only one that is going to be the best for us here, and that's Foresight. Gives you advantage on pretty much everything, gives your enemies a disadvantage against anything against you, and you can never be surprised or anything like that. It is just a full buff for 8 hours long. Then at 18th level of Druid, you get access to beast spells no matter what kind of druid you are. And this allows you to cast any sort of spell while you're in your wild shape. The only restriction is that if it's a spell that has some sort of material component that is consumed. So as long as that's not a requirement, you can cast any spell in your spell list while you're wild shaped. But also at this level, you get access to Challenge Rating level 6. And there's only one good beast here, that you really want to grab, and that's the Mammoth. It's an absolutely solid option. It has 2 attacks. So there still might be some scenarios where you want your 3 attacks from your giant scorpion, but this version is also more accurate, and it can use a trample ability as a bonus action while not requiring you to charge at somebody 20 feet like a Triceratops did. So you still kind of get 3 damaging abilities, and it's a pretty solid option, and not to mention it is a massive option. It's a Mammoth. It's huge. And then at 19th level of Druid, you get access to another ability score improvement, but you can choose an Epic Boon. There's one that's made for Circle of the Moon Druids. It's called the Boon of Fluid Forms. So first, this will increase our wisdom by 1 point, bringing it over its normal maximum. Next, you get Hardy Transformation. So when you shapeshift, and this applies no matter what, because it is totally separate as a feature from the other thing that you're going to get from this feat, the number of temporary hit points you gain is going to get increased by 20 points. So all of the wild shaping you do, you get more temp HP, which is a pretty big boost to the shield of health that you have. But also part of this epic boon, you get the feature Shape Changer. It gives you the ability to transform again, but you can only do it once per long rest. And it follows all of the same rules of your normal wild shape, except for one, because you can still do everything else the same. When you use this Shape Changer feature, the temp HP you get has nothing to do with your druid level. It's now an amount of temp HP equal to whatever the creature you're turning into is. And there's actually 2 other differences. First, it can be any type of creature that is a beast, humanoid, or monstrosity. And then on top of that, it can be up to a challenge rating 10. And this massively expands our options. Granted, you can turn into any challenge rating between 1 and 10. Or 0 and 10, technically. So if you want to turn into a T-Rex that does insane damage with just 2 attacks, you can do that. If you want to turn into a random wizard or sorcerer or some random monstrosity like a giant chicken thing that you can turn into, you can do that too. But let's target the more strong stuff. Not to say that a T-Rex isn't strong, because it's doing 4d12 plus 7 damage, and it can restrain a target while it bites them. But if I went through every option from level 6 through 10, that would be a lot of time. So let's focus in on the strongest options here, because we have to remember that there's a couple things that might not apply to this, because this isn't technically a wild shape. So the additional radiant damage you get from being a Circle of the Moon Druid isn't going to kick in. But if you're still doing melee attacks, your Primal Strike stuff will. So I'm going to give you the best options for each scenario. The first is if you're in a smaller space. Then you want to stick with more of a humanoid to turn into. And the best option there is a Warrior Commander. This comes from the Monster Manual in 2025. But it has 3 attacks, so that's great. It has 18 armor class, because you're going to have to rely on the armor class of whatever you choose, because this doesn't follow the exact same rules as Wild Shape. But it has 161 hit points, and that's a pretty massive temp HP shield. Not to mention you get to add another 20 on top of that. Every attack does 4d6 plus 3 damage, and if somebody tries to hit it, it can use its ability called Counterattack, where it boosts its armor class by 4, and if that attack then misses, then they get to do an attack as well. But if you have a little more space to spread out, you definitely want a good flying option. So go with an Aerosaur. This comes from Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants, and it's a gargantuan monstrosity. It has a flying speed of 120 feet, so it's insanely fast. It makes a bite attack and a talon attack, and it has a rechargeable gust ability where it blasts a bunch of people with gusts of wind from its wings. And if a creature fails against that, it's 7d10 thunder damage. And that's against a failed DC 20 strength save. So it's pretty damn strong. Then there's 2 more, and it just kind of depends on your favorite flavor. One comes from Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, and it's called a Froghemoth. It's literally a behemoth mixed with a frog. It's got 30 feet of movement speed, 30 feet of swim speed. It's amphibious, so it can go in air or water. It makes 1 bite attack, 2 tentacle attacks, and it can use its tongue. Each one of those attacks has its own bonus ability, like restraining a target by swallowing them, or pulling an enemy closer with their tongue, or grappling enemies with their tentacles. The last one is just because it's kind of epic, and it's a Malformed Kraken. This is another creature from the Yawning Portal. but it's the only way you're going to be able to play as a Kraken, because Krakens are notoriously high challenge rating. But a malformed Kraken can be a challenge rating 10. They gain immunity to lightning or the frightened condition or being paralyzed. They have a pretty massive health pool with 172 hit points, and by default, they make 3 attacks. One of those can be a bite attack if you wanted to, but most of them are usually with your tentacles. However, one of them can also be replaced with the fling attack. Biting is pretty decent. Hitting them with the tentacle hits and restrains and grapples them, which is also pretty good. But if you grapple somebody, you can also fling them, throwing them up to 60 feet in a random direction, and it takes 1d6 of damage per 10 feet it travels. And if it winds up hitting another creature in the process, that creature has to make a dex save, otherwise it takes the same amount of damage. And then on top of everything else, it has the ability Lightning Storm to just rain down lightning bolts on your enemies. There are a ton of great options, and the general boost to the temp HP you get from this Epic Boon is solid enough as it is. But the fact that you have these additional transformations that you can throw in there too just makes it that much more powerful. And then finally, at 20th level of Druid, you get the feature Arch Druid. So if you roll initiative and don't have any wild shapes left, you gain one. You can convert a level of your wild shape into some spell slots. And for every use of wild shape that you give in this situation, you get 2 levels worth of spell slots. So if you take all 4 levels of your wild shapes and you turn them into 1 spell slot, that gives you an extra 8th level spell you can cast. And then you'll just have to use your lower level spell slots to give yourself a little more wild shape to use later. Then finally, you also get the ability to not age like everybody else, aging 10 times slower than the average person. But you're already a dwarf, so you age pretty slow already, so you're going to be a really old dwarf. But that brings you all the way to 20th level, and that's the max level in D&D usually. If you want access to the character sheet for this build or any of my other builds, feel free to check out my Patreon, link down below. And if you want, there's a free trial available, and you can just download all the character sheets and leave later if you want, or you can be super awesome and stick around and help support this channel. But if you want to play as the ultimate druid in your next D&D session, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session.